Welcome. Glad that you're here, and anyone who is watching the live stream, glad that you are joining us. Dr. Avni and Dr. Kissel and I would like to acknowledge the memory of Robert Jordan, who was on our piano faculty here from 1980 to 2004. And actually then I got his job when he retired in 2004. He died in 2019, and the next year, 2020, the annual Robert Jordan Festival was established in his memory, using funds from a legacy he bequeathed to our School of Music, from which piano majors have also been receiving scholarships for a number of years. So we're very grateful to Robert Jordan and his memory, and we want to continue to honor him, and also that we continue to be benefited by the legacy that he left us, and that will be lasting for years to come. But that's how we're able to be here today and have this Robert Jordan Festival and last night and today's activities. Our guest today, Dr. John Murphy, is Assistant Professor of Music and Chair of the Piano Area at the University of Oklahoma. He graduated from SUNY Fredonia in 2010, where he studied piano with Phyllis East. And I was just looking back at some old letters on my email, and I saw some emails from 2009 when he was signing up for an independent study that I was giving on the Taubman approach. And I also saw that our alumna and current professor, Professor Ji-Young Kim, was also a member of that class. And also later in the summer of 2015, we think, John came with me to the Golansky Institute at Princeton that summer. And so we've done a lot of things together. He received his master's in collaborative piano at Manhattan School of Music and his DMA in piano performance and pedagogy at the University of Oklahoma, where he is now a faculty member. He frequently presents workshops and lectures on topics related to piano pedagogy in such venues as the MTNA National Conference, the National Conference on Keyboard Pedagogy, which is called NCKP, and the Francis Clark Center. His articles have appeared in Piano Magazine and the MTNA e-Journal. He is currently president-elect of the Oklahoma Music Teachers Association, a member of the steering committee of the Group Piano and Piano Pedagogy National Conference, and a committee member of the NCKP. And he is also now head of the piano area at the University of Oklahoma. So he's a very busy man, but we're very proud of him and very glad that he's with us today. So please welcome Dr. John Murphy.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Father Sean, for that very warm welcome. It is an honor to be back at Fredonia, speaking with all of you today. As a proud graduate of this program, I know firsthand just how special of a place this place can be. My education at Fredonia really laid the groundwork needed for the career that I envisioned for myself. And I look back and think of incredible faculty members here that were artists, that were scholars, that really provided the expertise and the empathy that I needed at that time in my career. And you probably don't need me to tell you this, but I'll just say it as a frame of reference. The people in this room are going to be the colleagues for the rest of your life. And you will learn from them just as much as you will from faculty members. When Father Sean invited me to speak today on a topic related to piano pedagogy, he graciously offered me the freedom to shape the talk as I saw fit. That's a gift when you're invited to speak on any topic as you wish. And I entertained several different ideas, but I kept coming back to reflecting about my time at Fredonia, this idea of reflection and then moving forward. So that's what I thought we might do today. Today I'd like us to explore the pedagogical landscape, looking back and looking forward. We're going to be able to just scratch the surface, and I am in no means the authoritative figure on the field of piano pedagogy, but I hope that this talk will just inspire some curiosity. And if there's something that catches your eye, there'll be a handout at the end of the session that will have links to further reading and additional ideas you might explore. So to organize our conversation today, I want to break it down into 4 different categories. First, let's think about who we're teaching, or who will we be teaching. What are some characteristics of, let's say, Generation Z? And of course, piano learning spans multiple generations, but I thought let's focus on the current college group and let's focus on the current high schoolers, Generation Z today. Second, what's our role as a teacher in the year of 2024? What are strategies, pedagogical approaches that are effective? How does this compare to instruction that occurred 10, 15, 20 years ago? A lot has changed. Third, what are some trends in piano pedagogy? What are some topics that are being researched? And last, if you were to someday wish to teach piano, or you currently do, how do you get more involved? Where do you start? Who are we teaching? And to preface this conversation that we're about to have on generation characteristics, I have to say it's not my intention at all to diminish individuality, right? When researchers describe characteristics of a generation, they're really speaking broadly on shared global influences such as COVID-19, or technology, or economy, things that we all have experienced in different ways. And when we talk about these characteristics of Generation Z, I encourage you to ask yourself, okay, what does this translate to in terms of teaching? What does this look like in a piano studio? Generation Z is the group of students, or individuals I should say, born between the mid-1990s and the early 2010s. So let's say roughly 1995 through 2010. And of course, there's never really a firm start and end date when we're talking about generations. So they're individuals between 14 and 28, current high school, undergrads, and maybe some even graduate students. A significant impact of Generation Z is they were born into a world with internet. Actually, they grew up with the internet. The internet expanded as they grew up. For a frame of reference, Amazon sold its first book online in the year 1995. And today, it's hard to imagine life without having Amazon Prime. In the United States, Generation Z is a culturally diverse population that makes up nearly 25% of the population. Statistics indicate that nearly half of Generation Z identify as BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, or other people of color. It's a generation known for cultural awareness, sensitivity, and the desire for inclusivity. Communicating with Generation Z. Direct communication is a characteristic of Generation Z. What older generations might consider lack of formality or even lack of politeness is sometimes regarded as a strength of Generation Z. They get to the point. Research shows that Generation Z generally dislike emails, but they prefer to communicate with short form, there we go, such as texting and messaging. And not to digress too much, but when I was a student at Fredonia, no one had smartphones yet. And the way we would communicate via email was you'd have to go to the student lounge, and there was 2 computer stations in the student lounge here in Mason that you would line up, and one by one you could check your emails from your professors. And if you got there in between classes, the line was out the door to the cafe. Yeah, I know. That's crazy. A unique feature, though, of Generation Z is the social awareness and etiquette when communicating online. They're able to recognize, observe, interpret the intricacies of communication on one platform or website to another. Let's compare this with my mother, who's a baby boomer. I recently performed a faculty recital at my institution, and my institution published on Facebook a congratulatory message for the recital. And do you know who commented on that message? "So proud of my Johnny." I had to call her and say, "Thank you, Mom, but as a professor, it probably doesn't look the most professional." And she edited it. Similar to online communication, Gen Z have an awareness of typographical tone in text communication, and actually often prefer to use complete words. It's different than earlier generations that grew up with SMS texting that got very accustomed to using abbreviated language. Gen Z even use things, imagery, emojis to communicate. That often softens dialogue, expresses irony, maybe even passive-aggressiveness. I would suspect that a Generation Z would have full understanding of what this reply means. Ouch, right? Lowercase k, they automatically changed the auto capitalization. Didn't spell out the word auto k, added a period at the end. So, how do you effectively communicate in the teaching environment with this generation? For those in the room that are from an earlier generation, you often find yourself not sure how best to communicate. I know as a millennial myself, I began teaching at my university position with a very firm rule. Email only, text was for emergencies. Nowadays, I text pretty much all of the time with students, and email it seems to be as the backup. They actually just removed the landline from my office at university. If independent teachers are finding creative solutions too in the field of piano, studio management software such as My Music Staff, Duet Partner are being used in piano studios across the country. And not only do these help with running finances, running scheduling, billing, payment integration, these programs offer ways to communicate with students and with parents. In addition to notifications, you can also submit practice assignments through these platforms. Generation Z are known to have a realist approach towards learning. They're forward thinkers. They seek to expand knowledge in areas that they feel are relevant for their career goals. And actually a criticism is that sometimes perhaps the focus is too much on practical employment and not enough on learning for the sake of learning. And this requires teachers, both pre-college and at the college level, to really consider curriculum that you're teaching. Will it be viewed as relevant for the future? In a 2017 publication, College Music Curricula for a New Century, one of the contributing authors had this to say about piano. Quote, "Piano studios across the country continue to graduate pianists who are capable of performing an impressive portfolio of standard, very difficult works, but who would struggle to play Happy Birthday in any major key." Now, I know that's not true of Fredonia graduates, of course, and I shared this not to diminish the importance of solo piano study. I'm not saying that by any means, but I am saying, are we creating a holistic curriculum that is providing the skills needed in the current marketplace? I want to share with you two research studies that have been done, and this is in relation to functional keyboard skills classes. And if you're familiar, here at Fredonia, you do offer that. These are courses designed to teach keyboard skills to piano majors, skills that you wouldn't necessarily work on in an applied setting, such as choral score reading, transposition, improvisation, sometimes even collaborative piano, an introduction to collaborative piano. In two research studies done, they found that only 25% of accredited institutions provide that course for piano majors. Another way to approach it is that means 75% of accredited institutions do not offer a keyboard skills specific course for piano majors. Interesting to think about. In 2023, a publication by Hanover Research sought to describe trends in higher ed And in response to discussing student retention and recruitment, the report describes, quote, colleges and universities are feeling an urgency to embrace alternative strategies and data-driven research to identify and solve system problems, not only for weathering today's challenges, but also for securing their place as an appealing, competitive destination for years to come. So that begs the question, are we teaching the concepts that our students are interested in, that they value? Does the curriculum match the current job application expectations? Research shows that there's a strong performance for collaboration in post-millennial generations. Gen Z often finds it more rewarding and engaging to learn with peers rather than work alone. And this is an interesting concept for us as piano teachers because we typically work one-on-one. How are there ways that we can create group learning in the independent piano setting? Think of Wikipedia, for example. How many people have used Wikipedia in the last month? A lot of us have. What's the premise behind Wikipedia? It's a group learning platform where anyone can contribute information on a topic. That's why oftentimes professors won't likely use it as credible work when you're doing research, right? Anyone could write about anything. Cooperative learning theory in higher ed, and in particular group piano higher ed, is something that's trending, and it's not new, but it's been continually discussed, right? How can we frame learning as a group in various piano settings? Here's an example of one that's quite famous in the cooperative learning structure. It's called a think, pair, share, and I just want to give you this as an example. In this type of framework, and this can be applied to any discipline, any area, students are given a problem, and first you need to solve the problem on your own. Come up with your own solution. Then you're paired with someone else, and you share your solutions, you debate each other, you agree on a mutual, or disagree, on a mutual response. Then third, this information is shared as a group for group discussion. So it's different than that type of group instruction where some people don't have to do anything. All right, in group learning and cooperative learning, the idea is that all are active participants. I'm seeing a big trend in this idea of silent movie recitals. Have you heard about this? I see a lot of independent piano teachers doing things like this. So in addition to doing, traditional fall recital, spring recital, holiday recital, teachers are thinking outside the box on how can we create more group learning activities. For example, a silent movie project where students individually prepare repertoire that can be cued and aligned with video footage that then brings the whole studio together with their family and friends to perform literature that accompanies a film. Can you imagine how motivating that might be and a fun way to work on repertoire? In my area in Oklahoma City, there's a very robust Clavinova festival that occurs. And this happens every holiday season. They have the local music shop in town sets up all the digital pianos and the students are reading ensemble literature. Usually one student might be the conductor or maybe a teacher is the conductor. And it could be forehand literature or it could be digital literature that's designed specifically for keyboard ensembles. Generation Z is well informed of both the positive advances in technology and the potential negative advances. In a 2020 survey, researchers asked Gen Z individuals their opinion if technology innovations will make the future better or worse. On a scale of 0 to 5, 0 being technology makes things a lot worse, 5 meaning technology makes things a lot better. The largest response answer was 31%, and they were right in the middle, 3 out of 5. This implies that there's awareness of the advantages and disadvantages of technology. Research shows that Gen Z is concerned with privacy and is cautious about their data being digitally shared. I was surprised to learn recently in my undergrad studio, none of them have Facebook accounts anymore. Which is interesting because my university spends a good amount of time advertising on Facebook for events. Gen Z is fully aware of the long-lasting impact of online content that's being posted. And this has been really weighing on my mind a lot lately. I recently had a 12-year-old pre-college student participate in a competition, and she played Kulau Sonatina. And at that competition, the parent is allowed to attend and can videotape the student's performance. Before that student even left the building, the student's mother posted that performance on Facebook for the family and friends to see, and actually very enthusiastic and sharing. It was exciting. But I wonder, that's going to be up there for a long time. I don't think I would necessarily want to see my Kulau performance on social media today if it was up to me. For collegiate students in my studio, I'm also thinking about the impact digitalization has on the experiential learning cycle. It seems like nearly everything my students do is live streamed nowadays, is public for anyone in the whole world that has the link and would like to click it to see. In a typical learning experience, we start with an experience itself, right? Then we're given time to reflect on our experience, learn from that experience. We conceptualize what we learn. We brainstorm ways that we'll do it different next time. And then we have the opportunity to experiment when we get to try it again. What happens when people know they're being digitally recorded and archived? Does that at all impact that cycle? Okay, now let's switch gears and think about teaching in the 21st century. If you think back on maybe older generations of teachers, one might call it perhaps an authoritarian approach was prevalent in the 20th century. Not by all, I'm just using generalizations, of course. And this would be characterized by a top-down model, where the teacher held all the information. They were the sole source of knowledge. And then in such an environment, the student would find themselves dependent on the teacher. Maybe perhaps even driven by fear or intimidation, and they would have to get the information they need. This is very different in the 21st century, where students have unprecedented wealth of information at their fingertips. The role of an educator has a profound transformation. No longer are we a gatekeeper of knowledge. Most people in this room could right now Google any composer they want and find out basic biographical information. You could go on YouTube and find about a dozen performances of a single piece, probably more. It's evolving the educational landscape. What is the role of a teacher when information is so available? And I think this answer really has to do about cultivating a learning environment that fosters critical thinking, that sparks curiosity, and creates a genuine passion for the subject of music. There's a fantastic article by Karen Hendricks and Amy Hicks, and they describe how, quote, the teacher becomes the facilitator of information, allowing learners to individually explore topics in ways that are personally meaningful. I think that key word of facilitator is really helpful. Through this lens, the modern piano teacher becomes more of a guide, more of a mentor, carefully curating information and steering students down a path of discovery. In a 21st century model, teachers are not necessarily viewed with this hierarchy, right? We're viewed as equal learners. We're both on a journey of learning. Hendricks writes and explains to teachers that being a facilitator requires that we listen, that we empathize, that we truly put ourselves in students' shoes and consider what learning looks like from the student's perspective. And how do we do this? Through careful sequencing, the order in which we present information, careful questioning, and valuing different perspectives. In the fast-paced environment of 2024, life as a young person can be pretty overwhelming. Social media connectivity, anxiety about future success, competition with peers. There's a lot of challenges. And I think our role as piano teachers extend beyond the rooms of our studio and even beyond music itself. Compassion is defined as a process of connecting by identifying with another person in the piano studio. In the piano studio, a compassionate teacher is one that engages in sharing of enthusiasm of students, offers support towards the process of learning objectives, and inspires a deep passion for music. And I think someone that did that for me was Phyllis East, who's here today. Empathetic teaching is the concept I often find myself reflecting on, right? The ability to understand and feel what others are feeling as a means of connecting with students. It extends beyond kindness and sympathy, right? Empathy enables us to discern, to anticipate, to address diverse needs of our students. If you've done any research on empathy scholars often break empathy down into two categories. Cognitive empathy, right? And that's our attempt to understand the perspectives of another student, right? What do they understand? What don't they understand? Where might they be confused in the process? What do they value? How do they view the world, perceive the world? Affective empathy is how we feel what students are feeling. And of course, there's some limitations to this. But I think affective empathy is how we gauge as piano teachers when we need to push them a little bit more. Or we need to say, okay, let's give some processing time, and we'll wait for next week. Language and communication is such an important part of effective teaching. I love this quote by violinist Isaac Perlman. He said once, "You can tell somebody the same thing in 2, 3, or 4 different ways. One way they listen to you and feel terrible, and another way they listen to you and feel wonderful." And I bet you all can think of a moment someone has said something to you that just didn't cause the right reaction, perhaps. In that outdated teacher-centered model that we were speaking about earlier, you often hear teacher-centered vocabulary, such as, "I want you to voice the melody more," or "play this again for me." Current research shows that using student-centered vocabulary, removing I statements, removing me statements, it cultivates more of a sense of belonging for the student, right? The focus should always be on the music itself. Students aren't doing something to please us. They're doing it for themselves as a learner and for the sake of this art form that we all admire so deeply. Effective educators of the 21st century replace vocabulary like this with specific praise, right? They use carefully molded questions that foster collaboration and empower learning. Now, in the field of education, there's so much written about questioning, and it's a field of mine that I'm very interested in. I find myself doing a lot of reading about questioning and how we ask questions. So I find it's appropriate to begin talking about questioning with a question. So my question is, why do we ask questions? Well, first, they're a powerful tool to check assessment, right? We can hear from the students' own words their understanding of something. We can tell if they are making cross connections. We can tailor what we're teaching to align with their needs. It prompts that higher level thinking, being able to align different topics together. It perhaps redirects focus. Perhaps it incorporates more interactive learning. And education textbooks love to categorize questions into different categories. Basic recall, higher level thinking, open questions, closed questions. And they're all helpful. And it's helpful to have these frameworks in your mind when you're thinking about questioning. But today, I want us to look at these 4 categories of questions. And these questions and these categories help promote student-centered learning. So the first one, guiding questions. These are questions that provide students a direct ability to reflect and self-assess. Picture someone performing here in piano area, and after the professor says, "What did you like about that performance of Chopin? What would you do differently next time you perform Chopin?" You can even shape it even more specific so the student kind of sees your direction of where you're going. "What did you think of your pedaling in the E major section of the Chopin?" Yes, I might experiment with a little less pedaling too next time I played in Roush. Then there's inspiring questions, right? These are questions that motivate students and show that we value their ideas. What character are you going for in this A section? How would you like to phrase this section? Which of these two articulations do you think align with the character more? Which of these three pieces would you like to learn next? And of course, when I ask that, there are pieces that I know the student can be successful in learning. Connection questions, right? How did your Wind Symphony concert go last week? Or, hey, did you get that summer job you applied for a couple of weeks, that internship? These allow educators to show that they're invested in students beyond our studio, right? And show individualism. In the pre-college environment, we do this quite a lot, right? Asking about how was school that day, or how was that math test that you were working on? It's important we ask these questions to not go on autopilot, right? To really be listening. And I'll diverge a little bit and tell you a story. I realized there was someone in my life that's an expert in connection questions. And it happens to be the person that I get my hair cut from every 4 weeks. Her name is Mackenzie. And Mackenzie, you know, I'm not a haircut kind of guy. I don't care. I just want to get my hair cut every once in a while. And I all of a sudden, I realized I really look forward to my haircuts with her. And I couldn't really figure out why. And over time, I realized she was brilliant at connection questions. She always remembered the last conversation we had. Last time I went to her, she said to me, "How was that dinner party you hosted last month?" And I couldn't even remember what dinner party she was talking about. And I said to her, I said, Mackenzie, how do you do this? How do you remember these little tiny details I tell you in our small talk conversation? And then she kind of paused and smiled, and she showed me her phone app. And every one of her clients had their own file. And after her haircut, she would jot down a couple of notes to herself. Do you know that her chair is one of the busiest chairs at that salon? I have to book 4 weeks out. And it's because people really enjoy it, and you feel important when you're with her for 30 minutes. So, piano teachers, what are we doing to create connecting questions? And is there a system that you can try for yourself? It doesn't have to be a notepad, something that formal, but something to think about. Last, goal clarification questions. These are probably my favorite as a teacher, especially with my undergraduate students. These are accountability questions. What are your memorization goals this week? When would you like to perform this in piano area? And then writing those down. It's in the student's own word. This was their own objective. Okay, I'm here to support you and help you achieve that. Very different than saying, I want you to perform on this date. We can't have a conversation about teaching in the 21st century, in my opinion, without talking about growth and fixed mindset. And this is not a 21st century concept by any means. Of course, you're probably familiar with the work of Carol Dweck. If you're not, a good place to start would be reading her mindset book or checking out some of her TED Talks that she's given. Essentially, the premise behind fixed and growth mindset is it seeks to explain how some individuals respond positively to challenges and some people respond negatively to challenges. On the right, you see fixed mindset. And fixed mindsets are the people that believe that we're born with set talents or set abilities and that's it, can't be changed. Fixed mindset people are very much focused on the end result and less concentrated about how they get to that end result. Let's say there was a piano area performance and a student had a little memory slip. A fixed mindset student would leave the stage saying, I'm horrible at playing from memory. Right? That's their ability. Nothing to do about, maybe I should have studied the left hand more carefully in this part of the fugue. On the other side of the spectrum is growth mindset. These are individuals that believe in the process, right? They believe that they can try different strategies to improve. If we think about it as piano teachers, how can we foster growth mindset and minimize or reduce fixed mindset? Well, first we need to do it ourselves, right? We need to model that language. Carol Dweck uses the phrase, the power of yet. Oftentimes if you hear a fixed mindset type of statement, I'm not good at memorizing yet. If you add that yet at the end, it changes the frame of that phrase. We can praise the process of students learning. If a student performed the exposition really well this week, you could say, wow, I am impressed of your phrasing of that exposition. What did you do this week? How did you do it? What were the strategies you used? And then the idea is that the student will learn to associate those positive strategies and apply them to other areas, either in repertoire or outside music. Praising practice habits. We avoid phrases like, you are so talented. I still hear that a lot in my pre-college studio from parents and grandparents about the talent level. That's a fixed mindset. We promote positive self-talk. Okay, I've heard you perform this in my studio during a lesson from memory. I heard you perform it in studio class successfully, and you performed it for piano area, and you're prepared for your senior recital. Recognizing the power of yet. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about some trends that I'm seeing in the field of piano pedagogy. And I want to preface this by saying that the piano pedagogy world is a very active community. There are tons and tons of resources and material published. There are many organizations, there are many conferences at the local, state, and national, international levels. So we're just going to kind of skim the surface, and I'm sort of a la carte picking some of my favorite topics that I think you might be interested in learning or hearing about. First, this idea of empirical research is a trend that I'm seeing in the field. Not that empirical research hasn't been around in the field of piano pedagogy, but there's an increased awareness and desire for empirical research. So what empirical research is things like quantitative research, qualitative research. It's research that's based on observation and measuring of information. And like I said, it's not new in our field, but in the past, we've relied on what we call practitioner research. Practitioner research is based on experience and opinion. So if you went to another piano teacher and they said, well, what order do you teach the scales? And they say, well, I go around the circle of fifths. That works for my students. And then you say, okay, I'm going to do that because that teacher does it and it works for them. There's the why factor is missing, and the concrete factual information is missing. And that's what empirical research is really aiming to do, something measurable so that we can support practitioner-based research. And many of it is actually very good. Much of it is very good, I should say. Let me share with you an example of an empirical research study, and this is one that I'm co-authoring right now. This is hot off the press. It's not published yet, and so you're getting a sneak peek at something that no one has heard of yet except the participants who participated. I co-authored this research study with Dr. Jenna Klein from Mississippi State University, and the title is Memorization in Solo Piano Performance, an examination of current beliefs among piano instructors. Jenna and I were at the NCKP conference in Chicago last summer, and we were having a beer one night, and we were talking, and we both were observing that a lot of artists that we really admire are performing with an iPad now. And it's not purely performing from solo memory. And we were talking about, it's interesting how we're starting to see it more and more. It's not becoming less common, it's becoming more common. Yet, in academia and even pre-college, let's say NISMA type of competitions, there are certain requirements about memorization. So we thought, wouldn't it be kind of neat to survey teachers and get some data and see, what do people really think about playing piano from memory? It's a performance practice that dates back probably to Clara Schumann. We've been doing certainly since then. So we created a survey. Jenna is a PhD, so she really is the expert out of the two of us in research design. We created a survey, and we distributed the survey. We got a grant to fund it through a Research Creative Endeavors grant, and we distributed the survey to all the piano teachers that are members of the Music Teachers National Association. And we received 709 usable responses. That's actually a pretty high number in terms of a research survey at the national level in our area. And I'll tell you some interesting facts about the demographic. The teachers in this survey ranged from 18 to 93 years old, and they taught in nearly every state in the United States. The only qualification to participate, you had to be an active teacher, and you had to be 18 years or older. And we're still interpreting data, so take this data with a grain of salt. And let me give you some of the feedback we've gotten so far. Teachers through this organization were first asked to identify what they teach. 80% say that their primary teaching is independent piano. And that was what we expected because we knew the demographic of the organization we distributed that survey to. About 15% of that demographic were collegiate teachers. And then we could from there ask collegiate teachers certain questions, we could ask independent teachers certain questions, and then a mix for everyone to get some information. We asked collegiate faculty if their students ever express anxiety towards performing from memory. And by the way, this is all about solo piano performance. 13% said always, 38% said often, 37% said sometimes. We sought to find out if piano teachers believe that their students perform more successfully from memory. And this was really interesting to us. We gave them 4 choices to this question. Yes, they perform better from memory. No, I'm not sure. It depends on the student. 70% of teachers responded saying it depends on the student. That's really interesting to me because, like I mentioned earlier, there's so much structure in our field that have very strict global requirements for everyone that participates. It's not an individualized approach. We asked teachers themselves as performers, do they feel like they are expected to perform solo repertoire from memory? 85% said yes, they feel there's an expectation. We followed that up and we said, well, does memory expectations deter you from performing solo piano recitals? 55% said no, but 45% said yes. That really spoke to Jenna and I. We thought to ourselves, wow, a little under half of the piano teachers that responded are basically signaling that they would perform more often, perhaps, if there wasn't this expectation that they felt to perform from memory. Now we get to some tech questions. With the advances of technology, should performing solo literature with the use of a tablet be acceptable? 72% said yes. 18% said unsure. 8% said no. We asked, as an audience member, do you find the use of paper score to be distracting? 31% said yes. 68% said no. And this is really fascinating to us. We asked, does performing with a tablet, how does that compare in terms of distraction? And actually, 73% said no. So our survey data, if it's accurate, actually suggests there's a very small preference to tablet performance over score performance. So I know that was kind of in the statistical realm, but it's very interesting, and that's the type of work you would do if you do empirical research. If you were to pursue an advanced degrees in that type of work, really a PhD does this type of work more so with research data. A DMA does a little bit probably of both, that kind of work, and usually in collaboration with the PhD. So I have a DMA, my area is more practitioner-based, but I do kind of, the co-author will do some of these types of studies. What else is new? There are so many publications, new publications, I can't even keep track, and it's an exciting time to be in piano pedagogy. First off, there's a new journal, the Journal of Piano Research. It's not even out yet. It's been announced. It's coming out in September 24 for the first time. This journal is going to feature empirical research studies specific to piano. We haven't had one in our field. Music ed has multiple types. And we've been behind in that sense, so that's really quite exciting. It's going to be peer-reviewed, and it's an international journal. Piano Inspires Kids is a brand new magazine geared for middle school and elementary students. The reading level is specifically lower for that age group, and this past edition was all about the music of Florence Price. And there's activities, there's these little competitions, like you can submit a composition to be published. It's pretty great. So if you work with young students, check that out. The MTNA Business Digest, that's an e-journal, or actually it's really more of a digest. That's not a journal, but it's an e-publication that comes out, and it really tries to kind of pull the curtain back and really look at the practical business aspects of our work. They do really interesting articles from other teachers that talk about finances, that talk about tax law, that talk about diversifying your income. Actually, a research survey, I think it was in 2021, teachers responded that 60% of their income is from applied teaching. But 40% comes from other areas like collaborative piano or business and what have you. Well, I thought that's pretty interesting to share, that idea of diversifying the career. Inspired Piano Teaching is a new book that's coming out by Marvin Blickenstaff. You might know that name. He's a pretty influential pedagogue. He is on faculty at the New School for Music Study in New Jersey. It's hot off the press. I think it's coming out like next month type of thing. And then really, that's pretty neat. Oxford and Cambridge are both coming out with piano pedagogy handbooks. Again, we're a little bit behind other areas that already have handbooks out by experts that edit multiple chapters that are in their expertise. I'm going to move a little bit faster for time-wise and talk a little bit about the publishing world. There are some real changes happening in the piano publishing world right now, particularly the pedagogical piano publishing world. Many publishers that we've used for the past couple of decades, think of, I don't want to say name specific, but some really popular publishers have either closed or have been bought over or have had their keyboard area no longer there, and it's just a general editor that's supervising all disciplines, band, choir, keyboard. And we're seeing, because of that, a result in self-publishing. We're seeing some very famous and well-known pedagogical composers, like Catherine Rollin, for example, well-respected composer, is now self-publishing her own works. So those of you in the room that are composers or might want to dabble in composition, the future is definitely changing in that way, going towards self-publishing where you are the editor, you're the advertiser, you're the distributor. So it's a lot of more different types of work, which also then goes back to curriculum. Are you getting training in those different areas throughout your degree program? Food for thought. This is an interesting one here. This was a big announcement in December. You probably heard about this. MuseScore, you probably remember that company, has acquired Hal Leonard. And Hal Leonard is sort of, if you look at Hal Leonard's list of who they distribute in the United States, it's huge. Multiple publishing companies are now under the umbrella of Hal Leonard, which is now under the umbrella of MuseScore, which has been historically a lot of digital and platforming. So that's going to be a really interesting development. I think everyone in the world is publishing world is kind of looking at that thinking, okay, where are we going here? Research. This is another area that's been really common in the piano pedagogy world. Who's here has heard of interleaved practice? Okay, well, I'll give you a little short snapshot of this because it's important to know. And I think all of you, your assignments, if I can give you one assignment, which is sort of a top-down, isn't it? But we, as a group, I would recommend that if you're interested, you should read an article by Barbara Fast on interleaved practice. And if you want the article, send me an email and I'll send it to you. So let me give you a breakdown of what it is. Traditionally, we have block practice, right? Block practice is when you work on one thing for an extended amount of time, you stop, you go into the next thing, you go into the next thing. So in a piano studio, it might be Chopin Ballade, Mozart Sonata, Amy Beach character piece, it goes on, and it's just you work on big chunks, right? Then, compare that with interleaved practice. What happens is you work in very short intervals, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, on a specific piece with a specific objective. So, the first 3 lines of the Chopin Ballade, articulation, and you work on that for 3 minutes. Then, your timer goes off, or I use a timer when I do it, my students use a timer. Then you go on to the next interval. And that, is a different piece. But if you look at this imagery, you always come back. So within that practice session, you actually are spending the same amount of time as you did on each piece in block practice, except what you're doing is you're doing high intense focus. You're not daydreaming. You're not playing for 20 minutes a solo recital in your practice room and not effectively making change. It takes a while to get used to. I did this during my doctorate when you have to learn a lot of repertoire fast. You do a recital every year of new repertoire, and that takes a good bit of preparation when you're programming that much new music. It dramatically changed the way I practice. But it's high intense focus. You're not distracted. You're not using your phone. You're not daydreaming. And you always have a very clear objective. It's not just practicing. It's practicing a specific part of music with a specific intention of what you're focusing on. You should give it a try. I think you'll be surprised at the difference. And by the way, all this comes from sports psychology research. This is what athletes are doing. Well, not all athletes. Some athletes are doing. I'll sort of conclude today by talking about a little bit of technology. Lauren gave an incredible demo last night in lecture on the Spirio. I am just blown away by Spirio, and so proud that a Fredonia alum is behind it. It's really so incredible and inspiring. The pedagogical possibilities of the Spirio to me seem endless, but what I took away from last night and something that I want to research more and explore is the iPad interface. If you think of our perceptual modalities, right, our learning preferences, pianists, when we're reflecting on our own performance, what do we usually rely on? Recording, which is?
Audio.
Yeah, so our oral perception, maybe how it felt, maybe we felt something was different, maybe we watched a video recording and we could visually see what our hand position was doing, or a spot that we used the wrong finger in. But that visual platform, oh my goodness, it's totally going to change the game in terms of visual learners in particular. You can see visually the length of a note. You can visually see exactly the point of contact and where you were at half pedal and where you were not. That's pretty exciting. I'm also so inspired by digital instruments. Some of the new digital piano and the actions that are being created are pretty amazing, actually. We just got a new lab at my institution, and I'm really surprised some of the actual action is actual hammers inside these digital instruments, and it's interesting to think about. Virtual instruction. Nearly everyone overnight seemed to have to learn a very big new skill in technology, right? And synchronous versus asynchronous instruction, that continues to be a big area of research in the field. Audio streaming, Spotify. When I was a student at Fredonia, we had Naxos. And it took about 10 minutes to find one recording that you were looking for and to download it. Or we had to go to Reed Library and take out a CD, and it was a long process. And now this past couple of weeks, all of Angela Hewitt's Bach catalog was just finally added to Spotify. I'm so excited about that. Just incredible. Those that teach, a lot of teaching editions now have their supplemental CDs on Spotify, on Apple, or on iTunes. Studio management programs we looked at. Instructional apps. We could spend a whole day looking at these. There's some real fun ones. Piano Maestro, Flash Note Derby, Note Rush, Staff Wars. There are practicing apps. Have you heard of the Amazing Slowdowner? That one's a lot of fun. You could listen to a recording and you can slow down the speed of the recording without altering the pitch. And actually, by the way, YouTube does that as well. If you're interested in that, you can go to the settings. But if you're trying to figure out Angela Hewitt's articulation of a specific session, why not slow the recording down and hear it that way? Artificial intelligence. And this one, I should have put a question mark, because this is the new thing that everyone at national conferences is kind of getting sprinkled in. And I think that if you want a topic in Piano Ped that's about to sort of explode and have a lot of research come out, keep your eye out about AI. I think no one really quite knows what's about to happen and where this research is going to go, and I'm real curious myself to see. The last other trend I see in higher ed, and I'm not going to spend too much time, is the topics of diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's been many, many, many resources that have come out. There are many publications, there are webinars. Jane McGraw came out with a new piano literature guide that has an extensive annotations on literature by underrepresented composers. We're talking about equity and access. That was something else about the Spirio that just kept going through my mind, is the equity of being able to put an instrument in a location where perhaps students would not have access to piano instruction, and finding a way to communicate and to collaborate with environments. How to get involved? In my last few minutes, I'll just say there's so many ways. First off, send me an email. I'll be happy to get you involved in whatever I can. There are internships you can do at national conferences, at the Francis Clark Center. Here are just some ideas to share. First, join Music Teachers National Association. That's really the largest professional organization of independent piano teachers. They publish the American Music Teacher Journal. They have the MTNA National Conference every March. This year it's in Atlanta, if you're interested in coming. Every state has its own chapter. The MTNA has a collegiate symposium every January, and if you want to come visit, we're hosting at the University of Oklahoma on January 24, this symposium. And what that is intended to do is give young professionals, collegiate students, a chance to show their research. And it's a whole symposium dedicated to collegiate students. It's a great way to get your feet wet presenting if perhaps you've never done a national conference or something like that. And then join the Francis Clark Center. Francis Clark Center, they're the ones who publish the piano magazine, Piano Inspires Kids. They have the NCKP conference, National Conference on Keyboard Pedagogy. That's biannual. That's every other year in July. And then they are the leaders in webinars. They have almost a webinar every, I would say, at least every week. And if you can't make it, they're archived, and you can. They're actually incredible. Since COVID, they have really expanded the field in terms of access to webinars. I know I'm just about out of time, so in closing, to summarize some of my thoughts from today, I believe that we as piano teachers have a very unique opportunity. We have the opportunity to share our passion and love for music and piano. We have the ability to nurture, to inspire, to challenge students to reach their potential, to become pro-social individuals that contribute to society. And I do think that through thoughtful, reflective implementation of teaching practices, piano students at all levels can become successful. And environments can be places where students feel safe to express themselves and grow creativity. Thank you. Yeah, I think research is still being surveyed right now about the effectiveness of online instruction. I think really over the past few years it has grown tremendously, and some teachers actually do teach fully online, and it's effective, especially when audio and video are on both ends working well and you can communicate. We all know the troubles we've had with virtual instruction. Going back to your question about group learning, many of the most successful independent teachers I know have a studio that's built on a model where there's both individual instruction and group instruction, right? Where you will see the student in group settings with other students at a similar level to do musicianship courses, to do theory, kinesthetic type of learning activities. So it's not uncommon that there's not a combination of the two, or maybe in a very busy world where students are all split between so many different tasks, you do a monthly group class at your studio. With my undergraduate piano majors, I have what I call Technique Club. And it's not curricular, they don't get any credit for it, but we meet once a week, usually on a Friday afternoon, and they get to play all their scales for each other, all their arpeggios. We do a lot of fun sight reading. It's kind of like the courses I know you have at Fredonia here. We don't have that at my institution, so I created one, and the students love it. And what I've really observed, in addition to their skill set increasing, is I've noticed their social interactions have really changed. And there's a bond and a click within the studio that I think has more of an influence than perhaps they're even aware of, but I notice it as a teacher. Yes, sir.
You mentioned a little bit, you spoke a little bit about artificial intelligence, and I would like to hear a little bit more about your thought on how that may shape the music industry, teaching piano, and so on. Do you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, I think, what I've heard is teachers using it as a tool for creating instructional guides. So, for example, a tool for creating a lesson plan, a tool for communicating with students, right? And in addition to that, they're looking at ways that AI can be used to even interpret performance and to assess performance as a tool. I do think we're just at the real early stages of what it can look like. In higher ed, I know that in my institution there's a lot of discussion about authenticity of authorship of things and being concerned about the students creating it themselves and being able to detect if it's used AI or not. And I think we're all sort of at the place where it's just about to really become a major topic of discussion. And so I don't really have an answer beyond that. I'm curious. There's a conference this summer, the Group Piano and Piano Pedagogy Forum, which is nicknamed GP3. And there's one whole session, a keynote speaker is all talking about AI and different ways to use it beyond creating a scripted conversation. So I'm really curious for that session.
Well, I think we'll have to end now so that we can go to our next activity. We have to set up a little bit for it. And there will also be questions too.
Okay. Well, hello again. And welcome to all of our guests up here on the stage. We have a wonderful group of distinguished alumni here with us who need little introduction, but I'll do a real quick one. Lauren Sclafani, class of 2012, Chief Stereo Technician and Lead Sound Engineer for the Music Technology and Media Department at Steinway & Sons, New York City. Dr. John Patrick Murphy, class of 2010, Assistant Professor of Piano and Piano Pedagogy, Piano Area Chair, University of Oklahoma. Sandra Leary, Bachelor of Music, class of 2007, Master of Music in Collaborative Piano, class of 2020. Job title is long, Instructor of Class Piano, Collaborative Pianist, and Certified Teacher of the Suzuki Method. And Ji-Young Kim, Bachelor of Music, class of 2005, Master of Music, class of 2010, Assistant Professor of Class Piano. So we have lots of Fredonia degrees represented here. So I'd love to start with a question. If you could each just tell us a little bit about your career path when you left Fredonia. What did you do? Where did you go to study? What work experiences and things you found along your way led you to where you are now? So Lauren.
Sure. So after I graduated from Fredonia, I really had no clear concept of what I would like to do, what I should be doing, other than I had some foundation of skills. I could maybe accompany. I played at the local church, did some playing, but really found myself wondering what the next thing was. So internships actually, after Fredonia, really shaped what I would do today. And the first internship I had was at the Marlborough Music Festival in Vermont. And I started that when I was a junior, before I graduated. But that started to inform the direction that I'd like to go. And it started to expand my ears in different ways than I had here. I started to become fascinated with the piano in ways that I hadn't thought of here. And this was being exposed to musicians who were performing chamber music together. I was listening to archives of chamber music from years past, working on a tape archiving project, and I just began to be fascinated with the way and the level that they were performing at. And I was observing the technicians and seeing the care that they were taking to the piano, how much time and dedication and hard work. Before that, I just had no idea. I know it followed me everywhere that I went before that point, but my eyes had not been opened. And somehow I found myself in a little booth with a window to watch it every day. And I just kept thinking about, well, that's really special, and what a way to support pianists by dedicating a career to maintaining the instruments. And really, that's something that pianists need. It's a rare instrument that you can't carry with you and own. You go from piano to piano. And I just became very curious about what's going on inside the piano and what a piano technician does. So from that point, I asked the Steinway technicians, how do I do this? What do I do? They said, you're crazy. Stick with audio engineering. That sounds like a good idea. And I said, no, I want to do it. And so they sent me recommendation to go to a trade school in Boston. And the concept of a trade school was something completely new to me. I had never considered it when thinking about my options after high school. And in hindsight, I might have just gone to trade school. But, I went to North Bennett Street. They offer traditional crafts and trades like violin making, piano rebuilding, bookbinding, preservation, carpentry, you name it. Lots of beautiful work being done there. And colleagues and students from all walks of life, right from high school, or people who had retired or changing careers. So I spent 2 years there learning the craft, and it all kind of came full circle when Steinway put out, well, actually, I did spend internships at Tanglewood and Aspen practicing piano technology and spending time dedicated to trying to up my skills with students and opportunities there. When I went to Steinway, they offered a music technology internship, and I took that. That was pretty much my dream. Somehow Steinway has always been, very appealing, and I fell in love with the instruments that I was listening to during those festivals. And I've been able to use the experiences that I've had in audio engineering here, studies in piano and piano technology, and it's just been a really clear path, somehow. I don't know how that happened, but that's pretty much my story.
Well, my path was kind of, not traditional, I would say. And it's common, actually, now that I'm in the circle of piano pedagogy a lot more, it's actually pretty common that a lot of people have done a lot of different things. It seems to be a character trait of a lot of pedagogy people that we do a little bit of everything and have different areas of interest. When I was a student at Fredonia, I was a double major in music education and piano performance and pedagogy. And I was probably not the best piano major looking back. If I was teaching, little John, I don't know how Mrs. East put up with my, I was very ambitious about collaborative piano, way more than I probably should have been. And I still to this day love collaborative piano as a performer. That's my area that I love to work in. And I probably practiced my collaborative music too much, more than I should have compared to my repertoire that I needed for my recital. And I also was very active with musical theaters. Ever since I was in high school, I was playing in pit orchestras all the time. I played, I think, 3 shows here at at Fredonia when I was a student. I did an internship my junior year for the Pittsburgh Civic Light Opera in music. And then after I graduated Fredonia, I student taught. And I loved teaching, but I was still interested in collaborative piano. And I went to Manhattan School of Music, where I did 2 years of study with Ken Merrill. And he was just a terrific teacher, and I really loved every minute of it. But it was a really intense degree. I worked at the time, too, as a staff accompanist in the preparatory program. And it was 3 recitals in 2 years. And it was, in addition to that, I was freelancing a lot and gigging in New York. And after it was 3 years I was in the city, I kind of just got to the point where I really missed teaching full time. So I looked for some public school teaching positions, and I got my first public school position on Long Island, and I taught elementary school, chorus, and general music, and they loved it because I was a district accompanist for everything. And I taught in the public schools for 5 years, 3 of those years elementary, 2 of those years high school theory and choir. And actually, I think it was some of the best training I've ever had in teaching. You can learn a lot in coursework, but then when you're actually in the field working with kindergartners, you very clearly know if you're being articulate in your directions or not. And all while doing that, I've been always teaching piano. I always had, depending upon where I was, if I had a formal studio, if I had 5 or 6 students, I was always teaching, probably since I was in Fredonia. I think I really started teaching here. And then my final year teaching in the public schools, what had happened, I got excess and cut from Long Island where I was teaching. I'm from Long Island originally. I got cut and I took a teaching position at Fredonia Public Schools, which has brought me back to Fredonia. And while I was there, I was teaching elementary school, and I just missed performing and I missed playing. So I started really practicing a lot again. And then I called Mrs. East one day and I said, Mrs. East, now that I'm back in Fredonia, would you please take me back as a student? I know you're retired, but come on, please, one more year. And she agreed. And then she was very supportive in the process, and I said, I've always had this dream of being a piano professor, but I don't know what my path would look like. And she said, you really should look at some pedagogy programs. And she said, I don't know really much about Oklahoma, but it's the place where people really go for pedagogy. So I did my research, and I applied to several doctoral programs, and they ended up giving me a fellowship, which I was very lucky. And nowadays, as a member of the faculty, I know how lucky I was. It was basically a step above a graduate assistantship. And I did my doctorate there. And while I was there, my mentor, who I went there to study with, Jane McGraw, retired. And then they asked me to take over as a visiting professor for 2 years as an interim. And then they did a big national search, and I was at the right place at the right time and got the job. And looking back, it's kind of interesting. I still am interested in so many areas. I love working with people. I love our repertoire. I love the piano. I love solo. I love chamber. I love performing as a collaborative musician. I love teaching. And it's sort of interesting to see how my work with musical theater, with piano teaching, with teaching in the public schools, how so many of those skills sort of overlapped. And I kind of eventually found where I was supposed to be all along was, or it kind of all worked out for piano pedagogy for me. And that's really how it happened.
All right. I'm pretty different. So when I came here, I think it was actually my very first semester here. Mrs. East said, hey, you didn't register for this class, but I think you should jump in. And so I took Suzuki piano and fell in love with the method and my teacher. And Jiyoung was in that class too. Yeah. And I just decided, I was like, this is what I'm doing. I actually came here to study piano with the goal of being a good enough pianist that I could go to an area and teach the advanced pianists, because a lot of students outgrow their pianists. So I was like, well, if I can be good enough, then I can help those kids. And then I totally flip-flopped, and I took Suzuki, and I was like, nope, little kids need good teachers. So now, that turned my goal into teaching good technique starting at 3 years old. So I took that class, and then I got a couple students. I started teaching the Suzuki method as an internship with my teacher trainer, Linda Gillette, and she let me ask questions. My first Suzuki student was actually completely blind, so it was perfect, because we don't do any note reading. When I was a senior here, I had already been looking at schools. I had applied at 3 different schools, one in Connecticut, one in Buffalo, and then one in Virginia. And I remember I went to Mrs. East, and she said, well, what are you going to do next year? And I said, I'm going to go teach Suzuki. And she was like, oh, okay. And so it was like, all right. So I took the job in Buffalo. I worked at Buffalo Suzuki Strings for 3 years. My studio grew to over 50 students. And my last year there, all I was doing was teaching these little kids, which is awesome. They do start around 3. You can start at 3 years old with that method, and it's really effective. But I missed playing. I was really losing my skills by only teaching these little kids. So my now husband said, well, you always said you could get work in Fredonia if we went back there. So we moved back here, bought a house, got married, and I started my own studio and came back to the college to be a collaborative pianist. So I was a collaborative pianist for a few years and decided I wasn't good enough. So it's actually kind of funny. I won't go way into this, but I had talked to Dr. Kissel about coming back and getting my master's because she had started the collaborative program, which is exactly what I wanted to do, and I got pregnant. And I said, oh, never mind. I can't do this. I'm apparently having another baby. Put it on hold, had my second child. Good, okay. Took some lessons with Mrs. East, got all ready, auditioned to come back, and I got pregnant again. So I came back anyway, and I did my master's. Everyone was awesome working with me through being pregnant and then having newborn, and Dr. Kissel held him a lot for me. So I came back, got my collaborative degree, and that has given me an opportunity to have stronger collaborative relationships. It also let me join on faculty as a class piano instructor. So all the while, I've maintained a private studio, and it fluctuates. But one thing about the Suzuki method is it's really easy to continue training even after college, so you can continue to take courses. They have their own journal, a conference, and a whole network of teachers. So that's where I am.
I'm glad you remember that, Suzuki. Oh yeah. And I'm glad you remember that I was in the same class with John too, with atomic technique. My pathway, I think you said different, but I think we are all different, and every individual student is different. I came to SUNY Fredonia as undergrad as clear goal of being a music education major. Like that was, and as many of you being music education major, it's a heavy load. So that was really hard to do, but that was my clear goal. I'm like, I'm gonna get out, I'm gonna be a student, I'm gonna be teaching in public schools, and I actually love teaching in public schools, and then you can, many of you who know me that knows that my personality is like right there, but you're gonna hear a lot of Mrs. East today, as we are, but because of a heavy load, after I graduated my undergrad, I went teaching, and I was accompanying for district, and just like John, everybody loves pianists who's teacher, because you can basically play for the whole district, right? So that's the thing. But you know, as a music education major, you always have to get a master's degree. And when I was thinking, it's like, it's just another degree I just have to get, right? Because to get the certification, then what do I want to do with it? And then Mrs. East came to my mind, and I said, I wanted to do something for her, something for me, because I felt, there's a lot of things like John said, I feel there are a lot of things I wanted to show her that I can do something better, that I proved myself more than what I could as undergrad. And that, I could have gone to music ed again, and, so many different directions, but that's one of the reasons why I came back as a piano performance. That was my clear goal. While I was here for my piano performance, and this will never happen at this day and age, I was offered to teach a couple classes of piano class. So as a starting master's student, right? That's never happening now. But I did, and the degree I received as a music education major, and the pedagogy that I received in a lot of pedagogy classes we had at Mrs. East, really, I was teaching class piano like, applied lesson, which is another thing that I would not do now. After years, I see now that didn't work, right? But that took me 14 years of being an adjunct of class piano, and I've learned so much. Everything has changed, and now I have a clear passion into this, doing something different with this field. And so that's where I am now, and I'm going to make it short for not to get so.
It's great to hear you tell all of those stories. I think for all of you who I knew as students, I think those stories wouldn't have been clear to you 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Let's talk a little bit about piano teaching, specifically the teaching of beginners and children, or maybe not children who are beginners. For those of you who are teaching in that mode now or have in the past, what's your philosophy of teaching? What goals do you have in your studio? What sort of things do you do in your lessons that help you to achieve those goals? And why don't we start with Sandra, since that's most central to what you're doing now?
It is. My philosophy, you'll hear me say this a lot. The Suzuki philosophy is to nurture by love. You teach the child, and the pathway is music. So you are always looking for what's the child's need. That To be specific with that, for example, I just finished a lesson with a kid who's really, really smart. School is easy. So in piano, I've talked to his mom and said this specifically, hey, we're gonna make it hard. And she was like, good, because he's bored at school and nothing is challenging for him. So with him, you know, it's pursuing challenges, learning how to overcome them, and then gain confidence from that. Other kids need the nurturing, the one-on-one attention, things like that. But you're addressing a child's needs and a child's goals through music. And my goal in teaching is not for any of my kids to become professional musicians. It's that they take the skills that they learn in lessons, the discipline, how to break down a large task and turn it into small, achievable tasks, and then put it back together, and then take that confidence that they learn from doing those things into any and all other areas of their lives.
I've had the opportunity to watch Sandra teach for the last 6 years as she's been teaching my son, and I've learned a lot about teaching from her. Jian, do you want to go next?
I have a homeschooled student whose purpose of taking piano lessons are actually not, taking lessons to achieve something greater for goals. They actually, first day, they came to me and they said, we are probably not going to practice. And I said, oh, you can't come to me, right? And they really didn't. They took at 30 year now, not practicing. Now, so what is their purpose? It's to have music in their life, because they're not getting it homeschooled so much, and they wanted to have the consistency of some kind of music. So what I do in that piano lesson is completely different than everybody else, right? So I just want to give the example that, when it comes to, there's so much when it comes to teaching child, and any beginner pedagogy, but teaching piano. But I think at the end, it's your students, and you build that lesson plans with the curriculum in mind as individualized, and the way every child is there. They may have disabilities, they might have the difficulty, they might need to be challenged, they don't want to challenge, or so I think a lot of times it depends on the student.
Yeah, I think my goal for students is similar no matter what level they're at. I think their skills goals are different, of course, what their goals in alignment, what they want to do. But I think first and foremost for me, it's creating and sparking curiosity as a learner, and then instilling a love and a deep passion for music. And knowing that, it could look very different. Not all students are going to love a certain category of repertoire that I really love. But I think your enthusiasm will breed enthusiasm. Your curiosity will breed curiosity. I appreciate other panelists have mentioned about transferring skill set to other areas, and that's something that's very cognizant in my teaching, and making sure that they're aware of these effective strategies that we're using, how they can apply them in other areas of their life. And the other thing I'm very much aware of in applied teaching is, especially pre-college students, is with the exception of their family members, and probably their family members, oftentimes a piano teacher is one of the only adults that they work with on a weekly basis for an extended period of time, for a decade or what. It's actually a really significant impact you can have on someone's life in areas both in music and then just socially and as a person. And that's something that's always on the back of my mind, and modeling compassion, empathy, being that support system for students. I think that sometimes is just as important, if not perhaps more, than the music side of things. There's been actually some research done about the general population of piano students, and I don't have the number on the top of my mind, but it's a very, very high number of piano students that take lessons growing up that don't use the piano itself as a career when they're older. And it's a very high number. And that's not a bad thing, you know. It's just the reality is there's a very small percentage of students become piano majors and elect to do a career in it. They could still enjoy lifelong music making, but without having a career.
Wonderful. So I have a question for Lauren. So how has your background as a pianist, a very fine pianist, informed the work that you've done as an audio engineer and also as a piano technician and also your current work at Steinway?
Yeah, I think my background as a pianist has really set the foundation for everything that I do. I mean, I'm sure many of us grew up playing piano from child to adulthood, and it's you're able to reflect at different points in your career as a pianist, and I think especially being able to understand what might be going on in the mind of a pianist when they're getting ready to perform, what their practice schedule is, what their goals are, what their fears and, you know, stage presence might be, and what kind of comforts and attention they might need, and how we can support them. I think it's really important to understand and respect that they're the ones using this thing that I'm working on all the time. I think as an audio engineer, it's been important to study music and piano alongside so that you have a foundation and understanding of music in general. And even though I knew I would never perform, it was frightening and scary to perform, but I just made myself do it and decided to do performance pedagogy because that's the right thing to do. You want to push yourself. Mostly to get that understanding and live through being a pianist, even if I was incredibly relieved after my senior recital that I don't need to practice anymore, but I can still practice music and enjoy the sound of piano. I think the way that I communicate and have learned to communicate and listen between being pianist, being audio engineer, and being piano technician are completely different for the three. And it's an important skill to be able to take one hat off, put the other one on. Once you learn to listen in a different way, once I started to study sound recording, I started listening in a different way. Maybe listening more to acoustics and sounds and observing different ways and taking myself a little bit out of just, focusing on the music. And then when I became piano technician, learning to listen to beat speeds and tuning RLE opened my ears in a way that sometimes I wished maybe I could turn back off and just enjoy something again. And that, of course, comes and goes, but if you're able to take those hats on and off and put yourself in the position of pianist colleagues, audio engineering colleagues, then you're able to understand and communicate. And it's really, really important to be able to communicate clearly to get the best work from a pianist if you're in a session. Understand where they're coming from, know when and how you can push a little bit, and know when that is absolutely not what we're going to do. And I think in my role at Steinway, it's just, during recording sessions, if I'm the piano technician and the audio engineer, there's been a lot of sessions where I go, how crazy am I? Because every single sound that's coming out that I'm not pleased with is my responsibility. And I have to sit there and just ignore, because I hear, I want to fix that, and it just won't stop, as a perfectionist. So you have to sit back, take that off, and listen to the producer, even though I'm sitting there going, do you hear that? Do you hear that? Nobody else hears that, so we're gonna chill. You know, and just knowing and being cognizant of when to interject and when to stay back and know what everybody's expertise is. So, yeah, communication.
All right, my next question is for the teachers again. It's sort of a teaching adjacent question. So let's talk a little bit about the business side of teaching. And this might also apply to freelance collaborative work as well. How do you manage things like finances and marketing and finding new students, these sorts of things? Who'd like to take this one first?
I can go first.
John.
Yeah, it's an important part of the industry that I don't think is currently talked about enough. Some program, like for example, at my graduate school, Manhattan School, they had a career office that had some workshops and training in this field that were pretty helpful at the time for me. I think one of the reasons I've gravitated towards teaching in an institution is that I've learned about myself that I am someone that really likes the reliable paycheck. I really, and I mean this in all transparency, I really like knowing exactly what I'm going to make every single month. Other people, that's not as big of a deal for them, but the flip side is you have to perhaps live somewhere where the institution is, right? You can't choose to live wherever you want to live and open up your own independent studio. So there's I think a balancing act in a lot of decisions that we make, and financing is important. I shared earlier that most people I know diversify their career, meaning they don't only do one thing in our field, and it could look a lot of different ways. By teaching, by performing, by collaborative work. There's so many possibilities, and we as musicians are actually trained in a lot of skills. And sometimes if you take a second and take a step back and think about all the different skills you have besides playing the piano, there's actually a lot of them. So I guess my advice would be to take a step back every once in a while and think, what else could you do as an opportunity? To be real practical, I would advise all of you to get a really good financial advisor and an accountant that really understands how to work with independent contractors, because that's what all of you would end up doing. If you work for an institution, you'd be filling out 1099s, and there's a lot of things you can write off. For example, studio space. If you teach out of your home, you can write off a portion of your house. And so I would say the MTNA Business blog is a really great resource, a Business Digest. If you're looking for information, and specific to piano teaching business, Beth Klingenstein has a really great book that's out all about management of studio business. The other thing I'll say too is about if you're teaching, and that is going to be your full-time job, when you're starting off, you probably have to take all the students that come to you and call you because you're trying to build your studio in numbers. I'm at a place right now where I don't take everyone that calls me. I have in my mind a sort of set number of students that I teach outside of the university because I am aware of my work balance life, and I could easily say yes and be teaching all day long, and I love teaching, but I also know it's important to take time for family, and finding the balance as a musician, as you know, is tricky with evening gigs and weekends, and so as an independent teacher, you can really set the tone for how you want your business to be structured, how many students you want to teach. I know some teachers that have a very set number. I teach 40 students, and then they're able to then calculate what their salary is very early on because they have their contract of studio agreements very well established. Studio policies, if you teach independently, you must have one. You must use a studio policy document, and it must very clearly outline the financial exchange and the relationship of the teacher and the family. I teach that to my pedagogy students. We do a lot of work in looking at different models. And I've seen do barter system. That was actually pretty common during the pandemic. And also a way to offer a reach out of some sort to perhaps lower income families. Of course, there's been scholarships that have been offered if you're able to financially do that. Some have been supported through programs like MusicLink. Others have been just your own ability to offer a scholarship. Some do sliding scales. Some teachers don't really quite personally understand the intricacies of how it works, but essentially some students pay more than others based on their family wealth, but it's been successful in some parts of the country. So, I don't know, that's kind of a very rounded response. I think diversifying what you do, don't be so narrow focused, especially at this point of your career where you're really just about to take off. That's my best advice that I can give.
Can I be honest? Marry someone with a good job. I am not kidding. Like, I don't have a financial person, I have a husband, and I give him every single check, and he gives me a credit card. And that is how we do things. I'm not kidding. It's the best deal ever. But I did support myself for a while, so I know I can. No, I am very fortunate, maybe I should have said it that way, that, you know, my income, except for when I was at the community school, has been a supplemental income in our marriage. So the fluctuation isn't a huge issue for me. But I have a it's pretty long, studio policy sheet. Every parent has to sign that before I will start teaching their child. Things like, I don't charge weekly, I don't charge monthly, I charge by semester. It's tuition. I don't want them to know what they're paying me per lesson. Because then, every time they miss a lesson, in their heads, they're going, oh, that's $25, or whatever, you know, and I don't want them to even think that that can be deducted. It's just part of your tuition. There's 12 weeks. I do 3 12-week sessions, and they pay me the first week. I do allow, if they need to break it up twice, they can do that, but most of them just pay me at the beginning. And then, this is a little wacko, but there's a clause in there about bounce checks, which people do still use checks, and you don't want to be the one, getting bank fees for that, so there's a thing about that. If your student is sick, they miss, you do not need to make up the lesson. All of those things to protect your time. Because every teacher, if you get into, yeah, I'll make it up, oh sure, I'll make that up, you don't have weekends anymore. And that's not fair to you at all. It's their fault. If you miss a lesson, that's different. But, you really have to protect your own time. As far as, making an income, I think having that tuition, it's not steady. So you have to kind of plan that out, because you're going to get a lot of payments at the beginning, and then you have your expenses that spread out, things like that. Same for collaborative work. It's a fee. If you weren't prepared and just text me 2 minutes before rehearsal and say, oh, I'm sorry, can we reschedule? Oh, no, we can't. Okay, you're the one who didn't show up. So I think when you're first starting out, it's difficult to be firm in things like that to protect yourself, but if you start that way, you'll be a lot better off.
Can I add another thing that, sometimes graduate students will come to me and mention about concerns about finances and their career as an independent piano teacher. And, there's a misconception that it's not a reliable source of income, or you can't be successful financially. And I have to say, it's really not true. I know a lot of independent teachers that maybe you have to move to a certain location where there's enough population of students. For example, there are several teachers in the Oklahoma metro area that have very full, active teaching studios that probably financially make double what I make at a university position, honestly. So it's not that, it really depends on, you're an entrepreneur, it's your business, and you can choose how you want your business to run and what kind of a business you want to run.
Would you like to add to that, Gio?
There's one thing we didn't talk about, I think, and there's so much, and I agree with everything you said, including finding a partner there who... Happy Valentine's Day if you're watching. But no, that is so true. No, right now, if I didn't have my 12 to 14-hour job a day, the one thing that I really think about these days that we don't talk about is the using the network, social network, and how you can also, going back to financial advisor, how you can, work that out. But I think not only moving to a place where there are more students, you can, if you're willing to, but also nowadays you can actually do a lot of teaching and so resources online, right? And when it comes to that, you are just building one lesson after another. So there are many ways to, but I just want to quickly add that part.
Well, I have to pitch another question to Lauren, and it's one that we've been thinking about for the last day or so, and that is, how is the Spirio going to change piano teaching? How can we use it as teachers?
Yeah, I think that the Spirio will really shine as an opportunity to take a step back from the piano, to be able to play in piano area, play at a lesson, be able to capture the data, and as John mentioned in his presentation, be able to analyze your playing and what actually happened in a different way. If you are a visual learner, the editor is a great tool to be able to see how you voiced this, how you're playing with the pedal, and actually make sometimes very quick adjustments, and sometimes things just click into place if you have that different way of getting the information, which can be visual. I think also the way to step back is, after a performance, be able to actually, okay, the nerves are not there anymore for me. This isn't for everybody, but it could be that my focus when I had to get on the stage and play is, okay, you're going to stay in that body, we're going to focus, we're going to get through this, but maybe not necessarily about the music and being fully present. For me, that was a huge thing. So maybe something I think about is to be able to step back, take a deep breath, thank goodness that's over and I'm off the stage, but I can go sit here and take a listen and maybe be pleasantly surprised at what I was able to do and build that confidence. I also think that Spirio serves a new opportunity in this virtual space, connecting and being a greater part of the piano community in the world. And I think that's a different opportunity and could lead to different inspirations, different ideas about the different roles people want to play in the piano world and what opportunities there are, and the ability to participate in exciting events and exciting concerts from here. Not to mention distance learning. I know we've talked a little bit about how difficult it is to do virtual lessons. Having an acoustic piano does help with this, and we're working on the technology to make that possible and try to make it as seamless and real as possible. So if you have the opportunity with guest lectures, master classes that are even going on at other schools, the ability to tune into those, listen to those, and learn in that way is, it'll never be a replacement of what goes on here and the one-on-one attention that we have in piano lessons and as a group, but it's something that can be added and enhance what happens here. So I think that there are some really good opportunities for teaching with Spirio.
I think we're all excited about exploring that a little bit. Do we have time for one more question, or should we go to Q&A? Okay, all right. Trevor.
Well, so we spend so much of our piano studies talking about the past and sometimes the present, like being fully present in a performance. But in this panel and lately, we've talked about the future of how we teach. But what about the future of what we teach, as far as creating for young students maybe a functional setting where they could sit down and play something from a Broadway book and just enjoy being able to play music, as opposed to necessarily coming to an institution to become a professional musician?
You answer, go ahead.
I was going to say, have you looked on YouTube? You're talking about people learning piano without a teacher?
No.
Oh.
I mean, as a studio teacher, how
This is something it's a great question, Trevor. It's a conversation a lot at the national level, in particular at conferences. I think, it's funny, for a long time we called it supplemental. And that was the word. It's a little bit of almost of a microaggression in itself, the word, right? It's saying that it's not as important as something else. So I think there's a pendulum, and there's a shift right now in a lot of mindsets that, the emphasis, yes, Western European music, there's a lot of beautiful, incredible music that's important to study, that we can study and learn a lot from, but what else can we also learn? And I think I've seen a lot of teachers now incorporate different resources that they're not considering it supplemental. They're looking at it and really being objective. What's the student's goals? What do they want to get out of music study? Okay, this person does not want to learn how to play Bach conventions. As much as I love Bach conventions, this student really wants to be able to play lead sheets for their church. And it's not that that's wrong. They're not less of a musician. It's a different type of music. And I think the community is having a conversation about it now and is really looking at, well, okay, how can we teach those skills effectively? And they are taught in pedagogy coursework at the graduate and doctoral level. So I think it's sort of making it more common and accessible. And then second, I'll just say I think the publishing industry has a big influence on what everyone teaches, what's readily available. Not everyone has the time to create materials from scratch to teach from. And there are some resources out there already, and I think you'll see an expansion of those resources moving forward.
Just to add that, I agree with the whole publishing. I second that. There are main publishers out there that you usually go into resources, but there are a lot of minority supporting and DEI friend. There's so many publishers out there too. One thing, I'm sure as you see and you meet everybody, oh my God, if I knew, I would love to learn, study piano technicians, go to, and there's the resources out there and all the pedagogy, so many things. But one thing that now that I'm focused where I am now, when I went to NISMA last winter, one of the big things came with the functional piano skills within piano, within the teachers. John and I are talking about this a little bit today. We spend many of hours in classes teaching non-piano majors, teaching them how, a fundamental piano, because many of them don't come in with experience. And then you say, okay, now you go out there, do your thing, right? So we have, but why not actually use that? And a lot of questions that I actually got asked, this new generations of teachers are saying, I got this keyboard labs handed down to me from the previous teachers, but they don't know what to do with it. I only learned how to be fundamental piano learning, but I never learned how to teach myself, but I have all these resources. So we are kind of secretly, my piano major piano class is creating a project right now to do something to give the resources to the teachers back, but also it's a very, myself, learning experience. It's been a huge learning experience, but I think that functional piano skills for someone who may or may not go into piano, I think we are at a time where it needs to be brought in, and I think I agree that it's been talked, it's trending a lot more. So you just need to know a lot of where to go and who to talk to, and I know resources came out from
the word functional, just interesting in general, how that's the word used. I'll suggest one resource, Trevor, if you're interested in this. The state of Louisiana's Music Teachers Association has the traditional festivals where students participate, but they also have what they call Keyboard Olympics. And it's a whole structured program that essentially assesses students like a regular competition would, but it focuses on other skill elements: harmonization, transposition, improvisation, lead sheet reading. So I encourage you to check out Keyboard Olympics if you're interested in a state organization.
That's super cool. Other questions? Everybody's tired.
Can I ask them a question?
Yes, of
How
course.
many of you right now, like, I know what I'm going to be in 5, 10 years? Let's say even 5 years, 10 years, right? Raise your hand. Do you know where you want to be, what you want to do? You know, want and for, you know where you're going to be in 5 years.
I don't know where I'll be, but I know what I want to be.
Right. I don't think if we were asked that question when we were at their age.
I would have said Broadway pit musician, because that's really at the time, what I really wanted to do, until I saw what the hours were like, and I realized I'm not a night person and that I don't play accurate after 10 p.m., so that was not good.
I'll offer just a little concluding thought, which is nothing is fixed. Trevor's question about repertoire, the best way to think about that is that nothing is fixed. The way you'll teach when you graduate is different from how you'll teach 20 years after that. And the materials that interest you and that interest your students will constantly change. And the wonderful thing about music is it's vast and eternal, and how lucky we are to be in this field. So thanks to our wonderful panelists for sharing their stories with us. Hopefully you feel inspired by their career paths, which have not reached a conclusion by a long shot. So it'll be interesting to see where these 4 go in the next decades, and where you'll be in another decade. So thanks everyone for a wonderful festival.